Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's APM webinar, Cutting Through the Hype, How to Use Advanced Analytics to Do Practical Things Today, with our guest speaker, Richard from the Oakland Group. I am Robert Allen, and I'm the APM Branches Manager, and I'll be your host for today. So, Richard is a passionate technologist who has a strong belief in data having the potential to build a better world. Richard, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone. Look, thank you, everyone, for taking the time out to listen to tonight's topic. I'm going to talk a lot about intelligent forecasting, reporting, and analytics as the evening goes on, but really, for me, the colloquial title, which we've sort of marketed under, Cutting Through the Hype, is really relevant. Look, I believe data analytics and the sorts of things that we're probably going to explore tonight are really, really important, not just for our profession, but for society in general. We are, in the moment, going through some funding with the government, and funny enough, it's lots of it about how we're going to rebuild the UK economy after COVID, and a lot of that comes back down to large capital programs. And I think it's beholden on society that we spend their money and other people's money wisely. And so there's a real opportunity here, but there's also, boy, is there a lot of hype out there. And just to manage expectations tonight, firstly, I'm a data enthusiast. I'm not a data ninja. So if anyone wants to get into talking about particular code modules or whatever, I'm the wrong chap. But as an advocate and an enthusiast, actually, I don't want a flashy product promising the earth. I don't think that we're anywhere close to replacing the skills of the project manager. And quite frankly, we're not all going to get to the place where we can sit at home on the couch and just ask the computer what we're going to do next. Everyone can kind of dream, if that's a dream, of that kind of future world, and you can decide whether that's utopian or dystopian. But we can dream of that future world. But actually, kind of what we're going to try and talk about this evening is much more real, much more nitty-gritty, perhaps less headline grabbing, but I think is where there's real value in this activity. So just a little bit about me, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I grew up in the bottom left-hand corner and the top right-hand corner of this slide. I left the ivory towers of university, went and worked in the dockyards of Scotland, and found myself serving on a submarine. And it's knocked a few edges off me. It was also kind of my first experience of pretty large budget refit work and how things all fit together. And how actually it's at one level, it's an enormously complicated program, enormously complicated system, huge dependencies, and all that good stuff. But at the other hand, when you want something done, how often is it that it's a couple of blokes in a van who are one of the few people in the country that actually know how to do that specific job, and actually you are dependent on that tiny bit of detail as much as we're dependent on the overall system. Continued a glamorous lifestyle since then. I have worked across utilities, done quite a lot in the world of sewage and wastewater. I've worked in sugar factories, food parcel, food manufacture and the like. And actually, to the other side, not all industrial. I spent a while working in banking as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Slightly jaded, but hopefully with that kind of real world experience. And hopefully that chimes with people on the call. What do I do for a living these days? Well, I suppose I have the privilege of being the managing director of Oakland, and so my job is fundamentally helping other people succeed in doing their jobs, and I spend my life doing that. But as a business, kind of what are we about? Well, we're going 35 years, and most of that time has been spent in the world of process, lean, Six Sigma, and actually how you apply that to the quality space. Our founder, Professor John Oakland, wrote a book on total quality management in construction. So kind of, it's always been part of what we do. But perhaps what's more interesting is, as a business, 30 years of servicing big customers in a very traditional way, actually we've made the pivot around data. And I do like the consulting bit where we go and tell other people what to do. Actually, we've had to take our own medicine, and we talk about data being disruptive. We have where we work, who we employ, how we go to market, what we do. We're pretty much unrecognizable, and that's not because we're all flashy and trendy, but that is kind of how disruptive becoming data centric actually is. We do 4 things. The operation improvement still a big part of what we do, but we have the kind of what I call the data stack. And so we start with data strategy and governance. We do a lot of work in data engineering and cloud, the boring data manipulation that lets you actually do analysis. And actually, we do a relatively small amount in the flashy world of machine learning and AI. That's clearly some of what we're going to talk about today. But if there's one takeaway from the call, it's really that is the cherry on top. And actually, it's the first 2 boxes there that have been really important to this journey. We do it for large customers, big utilitarian customers now around Heathrow and the like. And on the right-hand side, I think it's a bit small on the screens, but essentially that refers to the full stack. So we do everything from cloud-based, AWS, Azure, things you may have heard of, through the big databases, eventually up to presenting in Power BI or Tableau or Click, things that most people will have heard of. So just to kind of bring us back to the focus around what makes projects special. What are the characteristics of the organizations that we're working with, and the characteristics of the organization with the challenges we're trying to solve. And we've touched on some of them already. They are big buck organizations. Name checked Heathrow already. Expansion was clearly a lot of money. The railways will come on to a bit more, spend over 100 million a week on upgrading the railway. Nuclear, Ministry of Defence, highways. The money is massive, and inevitably that means that organisationally they're complicated. There is lots of governance. That's both project governance, PMO. We were chatting today with actually how the PMO is isn't an ancient concept, but actually also stakeholder management and navigating the politics, quite frankly, of large organisations with many funders and the like. And the little wind turbine is that because of what we do generally matters to the public, or certainly matters within the organisations with which we work. People notice if the lights go out, or people notice if the upgrades don't happen. And so, deep down back to the start of my little COVID intro, it's important, but obviously with that importance comes interest, which isn't always informed and sometimes oversimplifies the situation. From a data point of view, then, what do people want? I'm just going to assert this. The first is, a good old dotted line on a bit of graph paper. Actually, people want to know what's going to happen in a week's time, a month's time, a year's time. People want to be able to deep dive into specific bits of data and really understand what was going on at any moment in time. Of course, there is reporting and often pretty substantial reporting empires in terms of getting information out of various systems. And then, yes, wouldn't it be nice if we could connect the dots a bit better and not have to do everything manually? And we'll come on with that. I think those things are pretty ubiquitous. I cut my teeth a few years ago project managing. I wasn't doing anything glamorous, but managing the Sir Peter Henley review for the railways. So that was a big, can we afford it and can we deliver it review. And what struck me from a rather naive project management point of view of, well, we'll just we'll get the plans out and we'll have a look, was actually how much all of those things came into play, and particularly when the political interest gets big and how that starts to colour the judgments of everything else. So with that in mind, we were set a challenge from some friends of ours. And the challenge really was to say, look, we don't really care about data. We have lots of it. But we want to build practical tools, and actionable insights, and things that will actually make the ship run better, faster, smoother from all the data we've got. And ultimately, it doesn't matter, how pretty the dashboard is or how clever the machine learning is, unless it changes the behavior or changes the decision. What's the point? And so we did have quite a long wrestle with them on, how much are we going to shoot for the stars versus how much are we going to do sort of near-term practical things. And it came back near-term practical really quickly into 3 areas. 1, can we spot projects that are distressed and direct our assurance activity better? We've all seen the green, 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 red, and then the collective sigh of relief from other bits of the organization that go, great, we've been let off the hook. Can we spot the projects that are going to go wrong sooner? Can we find value from historic data? Lots of organizations do lots of reporting and they keep the data, but how often do people actually go back and get proper insight from what went before and use that to inform the future? And finally, yes, actually reporting would be really good. While we're doing the collection, let's not forget the simple stuff. But actually, that belies quite a deep question of, can we get the reporting so we get it out quicker, faster, and that we believe it happens to have lots of arguments, which is a non-trivial task. So I'm just going to ask a poll. Hopefully Rob can do this bit now, which is really around where data is a priority in your organization. And, is this sort of thinking really up there and important, or is this sort of thing something people know they should be doing, but perhaps isn't quite making to the top of the to-do list?
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. So if I could ask everyone to join the poll, is using data more effectively a priority for your organisation? So very quick responses here. So currently, yes is winning around the 75%, 80% mark. About 60% of the people in the room have responded, so I'll leave it open for another 10 seconds. But it looks around the 65, 70% on the yes side, 11% no, 24% sometimes in the future. So I'll bring that to a close now, and I'll share the results. So we're looking at yes, 65%, no, 11%, sometime in the future, 24%.
Cool, thank you. And for me, it's a really interesting result because yes, unsurprisingly, 2/3 of people said, data's a priority. What's surprising though is 1/3 said it's not, or it's something we're going to get to in the future. I think if you were to go into many other industries right now, scores would be much, much higher. And that's not to be critical of anyone, but it is, I think, an interesting observation of where we're coming from. And what do we tend to find in most, organizations, and this is obviously generic, but I think it could apply to almost anyone. Where at the bottom of this, we have a whole bunch of separate source systems. We have finance systems, planning systems, risk systems, the list goes on. Probably some of those are integrated and are pulled together into some sort of data warehouse, which in turn produces reporting. I suppose that's the left-hand column. But then very often there'll be other systems that sit on the side which aren't integrated. And so sooner or later you get to someone, a bit old school, Excel into PowerPoint, or newer school, perhaps we've joined everything up with Power BI and it looks really good, and actually that would have been a big step forward. But deep down the data isn't joined up. And so clearly, there's a whole mix of technologies in here. There's a huge amount of cleansing activity, but it's a bit like my manufacturing heritage of trying to polish in the quality at the end of the build process, and you be doing that on every widget that comes off the production line, and not always are we going upstream to solve the data quality at the input stage, or even know what we mean by data quality, and we'll come on to that a bit later on. And finally, it's really hard to combine data across platforms. At a simple level, if you've got a spreadsheet, we'll look at project numbers and we'll try and key everything on a project number. but then you realize that some other systems do everything by site location or by customer type. And actually, how easy is it to combine the data to get a unified view of what's going on? And what's apparent is very few systems have been designed to be linked up properly. And hence, we get silo reporting. We rely on experts to interpret the data and kind of overrule it. And also, because of that, often the corporate memory is diluted over time. So we think we've found a way through some of that, and to keep everyone on the call, we would say it's worked. And I'm not going to dwell on this slide, other than we've seen a really significant improvement in reporting accuracy, significant improvement in forecasting, an ROI, and I said 10 to 1 is made up, but it's much more than that. But also a whole bunch of second order benefits around improved confidence, improved compliance, and actually transparency, not just within the business, but with stakeholders and people around. So what did we do? What was the solution? And I suppose this is where this gets a bit more gritty. So firstly, if you remember back to that tech stack at the start where we talked about governance, engineering, and then the AI team, that is exactly what we had to pull together. But we had to pull that together in complete concert with the business reporting, business project managers, business financial leads, and financial controllers, risk leads, and work really hard at coming out with some practical solutions. There was a thing a little while ago of people called it dark data and had all these sorts of things around, which was just give us your data, the context isn't important, we'll throw some scientists at it, and we'll come up with some crazy great stuff. And it sometimes works, but actually the good old-fashioned discipline of sort out what the problem is you're trying to solve before you run off and solve it, and assemble a proper team. Again, there are loads of businesses out there that will go off and recruit a data scientist because, hey, everyone has a data scientist these days. And without the rest of that ecosystem around them, they're rather left floundering. And so, yeah, that combined team enabled us to develop this. And this is as techy as we're going to get. But essentially, we've used the cloud and an application called Databricks. And again, we're not a vendor. I'm not trying to sell it. It's just what we used to combine data from numerous source applications. And we built that through an ingestion engine into this 4D data model, which is the clever bit. And essentially, it allows us to look at every moment in time from every other moment in time. So, most corporate databases are pretty good at telling you what's happening today. And they're like stacks of paper that every time a new record comes in, it goes on the top of the stack, and I can look at the top of all these different stacks of paper and join them up and see what's going on, and it's great. If I want to know what happened 6 months ago, I can go back in that stack and try and find the right point in time, and then I can tell you what happened 6 months ago. If I want to plot stuff through time, and especially if I want to do dependencies through time, it gets really difficult. And so, actually, simple questions. How accurate is our forecasting? 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out, 1 year, how accurate are we in forecasting what's going on and where we're going to come out? And it's remarkably difficult to get to that answer with the current systems of fragmented and disjointed data. So the 4D data model is both a thing and a concept that joins that up. And actually, once you've got that repository, you can then start doing intelligent forecasting better, you can start looking at data quality, you can start doing more advanced analytics, and quite frankly, you can keep adding modules down there and as many business problems as we can come up with. And then finally, we serve that into the standard visualization tool. We're not going to outcompete Microsoft or Tableau or Click at their tools. They're really good, really powerful. And so let's service the data in a way that allows us to service it to the right people, control the security, control the access, control when they can blend the data, when they can't blend the data. So, effectively, as soon as someone starts bringing their own data in, have they corrupted the reporting? Have they corrupted the model? So you have to have pretty strict controls, and the system allows that strict controls. it looks really simple. Yeah, that's all these conceptual diagrams do, but it flushed out a number of real world issues. Data access. So even within a corporate, not everyone wants to share their data, even with other bits of the corporate. And whose sign off is it to say the data can be shared? Is that an IT decision or is that a business decision? Data security. I think most people have got over putting their data in the cloud, but not everyone. Which systems are we going to try and integrate? Are we doing this in AWS, Azure, or a private cloud? We've actually worked across all of those, and one of the reasons we use Databricks is it's kind of transferable across all those different clouds. And probably most importantly, all coming back to hype, is managing expectations. People somehow, yesterday were happy looking, or happy, not happy, but frustrated with the, analysis in a spreadsheet. And as soon as you start to tout this stuff, people think it's just going to solve the world tomorrow. And actually, it just brings a load of challenges which will help us build in the right direction, but it's certainly not a silver bullet. What does this look like in an actual deployment? Well, I've alluded to Network Rail quite a lot. They've been responsible for not all of this, but a big chunk of the work we've done. Network Rail infrastructure projects, I'm sure there's probably someone from them on the call today. They are the agency within, or department within Network Rail that controls the capital spend across the business, and effectively acts as a clienting organisation facing into the sort of tier 1 suppliers. This is all changing at the moment with putting passengers first and reorganisations within NR, but that's a rabbit hole we don't need to go into. Fundamentally, though, they have a whole suite of systems from Oracle projects, Primavera, a risk management system, system that solely dedicates, funders, whole bunch of systems doing safety, access, and then a whole bunch of things people euphemistically call databases, but are spreadsheets that get blended together, and we can now, using this architecture, use a mixture of Power BI and Databricks to do that reporting. So, enough of the chat. How does that actually work? How does that actually look? So I'm going to show you some Power BI slides now. This is all anonymized data. Obviously, around know we do this, and our company is sharing what we're sharing. And you can't have a conversation on data without talking about data security and the like. But I think it is useful to see some of these tools in action. In reality, obviously, these are running standalone off my desktop today, but within the organization, they're now cloud-based, they're accessed online, on the tablet, on the PC, and are refreshed, daily or more, depending on how often source systems are refreshed. So the first of these I'm going to look at, which is probably starting with the shiny stuff first, which is, well, does this work? And so this is certainly the most technical slide I'm going to put up, but these are the things we have to learn to read. So basically, here we've got what the region thought was going to happen and what did happen, what our system thinks was going to happen and what did happen. And this is done in period 1 of the year, so right 1 month into the year. And what this is saying is, of 151 projects that went under budget, the regions at this point were self-identifying 37. Yeah, the model was getting 127. So 84% of the problem, as opposed to 25% of the challenge. And for Network Rail, their problem was particularly about underspend. It doesn't have to be about underspend. It's just the nature of what they were trying to model. As the year goes on, clearly the business gets better. But 3 periods in, we were getting 130 out of 151 correct. We were also getting some false positives, if we're honest. So, this isn't a go and shoot the project manager or just tell everyone they're rubbish, but in terms of where do I direct my human assurance and my other conversations around this is really important. And we've already had some fascinating workshops with assurance teams and project managers as we've started to work through this. And lots of the time, particularly this year, you look at some COVID things and they go, oh, that's because there's a bridge in the corner of the field we can't install for 9 months, and that's why there's a funny curve going on. And go, well, that's great, that's fine. But now we know. Overall, this is the budget at the start of the year. Again, made up data. This is what the regions have forecast, and you can see us trending down to the actual point at the end of the year. And this is what the model predicts. And so again, you can see for every period in the year, the model gets closer to the actual end answer than the regions do. And there's a particular point where we were trying to build the model to work between 3 and 6 months out, because clearly, at the end of the year, it's a bit late to take any action. That then turns into a proper tool that can be used by the business. At the top of the shop, you end up with these sort of stacked charts that says, this is what the plan was, this is where we think we're going to overspend, this is where we think we're going to underspend, and hence this is the total spend we're predicting for the year. And that's potentially hundreds of millions different to what Treasury thought, which is clearly a problem if you have to spend your budget this year or you need to take mitigating actions. That then breaks down by program, and you can start to see, for anonymized programs, basically what's the difference between what the model thinks and what the region thinks. And then finally, you can take that all the way down to a project level, and this is the sort of insights you can give a project manager. So again, this top curve is what the forecast at the original start of the year was. This is what they've done so far, and this is the project forecast for the rest of the year. Nice little hockey stick, and that's where we think they're likely to come out. And then on the right here, we can start to say why we think that's true based on the things that go into the model. And it's worth just talking a little bit about the sorts of things that go into the model. Predominantly, this is looking at the ability of project managers to forecast and the ability and the relative kind of importance of various parts in the project lifecycle. And I say that because so at this stage, relatively little of this is particularly domain specific. So lots of this is based on railways. There is some bits in here around, is it track, or is it signaling, or is it rural, or is it urban? But in general, it's not super technical. And that's largely because as a clienting organisation, the railways don't have access to the super technical project plans, because that's all done by their supply chain. Other things that we get out, and the last little bit of this demo, if I can find the right widget, is a bunch of additional insights. Actually, this is from a different client, but quite interesting. So this is just a record of the number of projects in the system that are marked as open but look like they are closed. And they look like they're closed because they're not spending any money, they've spent all their approved budget, no one's updating them, blah, 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 blah. And so it's not to say anything's awry here, but clearly if you want to see the wood for the trees, thinning out the trees and the closed trees is really important. You can start to spot other behaviours, projects that just pass through their forecast to their actuals every month. So you kind of go, wow, you're doing it. Your forecasting is either incredible, or something's going wrong with the data, or there's a business behaviour that involves retrospectively updating things. And that's not, again, to judge anyone, but clearly if people are adjusting forecasts to be actuals, it makes future analysis quite tricky. Last one I'll do is, of course, all those projects that we think that closed have quite a large amount of risk money still allocated to them. So, at best, that's money that's never going to be spent. That might also be, other reasons in the organisation why that's true. But you can go through and we can see things like milestones, for finances, project schedule slippage, to all build up an indication of data quality in the business, project management behaviour in the business, and ultimately project success. And at the start of this, or early on, I talked about data quality. I think it's really, and it's probably we could have a whole separate presentation on data quality, because it's very easy to go, well, is the data in the system right? Well, is it being corrupted? Is it being loaded properly? But actually, a huge amount of the issue is it being loaded in, particularly project data, which is often manually inputted? Is it being put in the right way, in a consistent way? And Is that the reasons why data quality doesn't feel as good as it might be? Did the business change its business processes 6 months ago, which is again washing through the data? Clearly, our friends in most construction industries, or many, are going to have a torrid time in their data around now because of the COVID impact, and that's going to ripple through their data for years. Interestingly, there are other things, general elections, certainly in government businesses, about 6 months on, the inevitable review happens and a load of stuff gets put on hold until it's unfrozen. So you can start to see these patterns in the data. So closing towards the end then, this is the start of a journey, and the start of producing tools that people they're still quite analytical. We are a long way from the point where it says press this button to make it all well, or just follow the computer. And I'm not sure that would be terribly sensible. We're quite a long way from that. But how we make these tools more user-friendly is a really important feature. The other thing we're looking at, which is the relative importance of all these different things to different users in the business. And again, this has come out a bit later in the day, but fundamentally, we can use this whole approach to service three things: reporting and self-service access to information. We can use it to support advanced reporting as a data feed to other processes and sources, and to help the kind of the corporate reporters do their job. And finally, we can use it to produce machine learning and AI, which is very interesting, but also I have to say, keep senior management do engaged. It's something you can go and talk to them about. And so at the moment, we are working with Warwick, Networrail, and Heathrow, and we're in the process of working with Innovate to secure some funding to basically say, well, how can we take this to the next level? How can we really clear what those different stakeholder groups want, and how can we genericize what we've done here so that it can work in as many areas as possible, and quite frankly reduce the cost of adoption as well. So I would say there's no silver bullets here. We've assembled the bits on the floor, and we're building out from there. So I think that sort of brings me to the end, and clearly we'll invite questions, but obviously you can reach out to either the APM or us directly if you wish to have an offline conversation. So Rob, what do we have going on in question space?
Thank you, Richard. Firstly, thank you for sharing that knowledge. It's really good. Thank you. We've definitely got some questions coming in. So David has said, this seems to work well in the railway industry. Would it work across other sectors?
So I think it would. We've already done it we've done it most in railways and a bit in other places. But the fundamentals of project management and project behavior are pretty similar, especially in capital programs. The supply chain is largely the same people, and there's a pretty fluid movement between the different organizations. So I think at the large, very capital intensive project end, yes. I think the research will tell how far we can stretch that into either very small projects or projects in a completely different domain. But as I said in the presentation, we're not using much particularly railway specific features in it. Actually, you'd find the same sort of features in almost any project out there. And so our expectation is it generalizes is pretty well.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got a question from Asuk who says, will such techniques help with stopping watermelon reporting to program and portfolio managers? That's the biggest issue. The true nature of the problem is shown when it's too late, as the project manager hides it, as they think they can resolve it without alarming the project management team. Then at board level, they think they don't know what they're doing. That
is exactly the problem we're facing into. I think, back to the slide that said, at the start of the year, project managers were owning up to about 25% of the problem. We were thinking we're getting near 85% of the problem. And in fairness, when you look at the data, project managers are quite good at owning up to overspend, because most organizations have pretty strict controls of spending money, and you have to go and ask for more if it's going to go wrong and all that kind of good stuff. Underspend, clearly you can rely on optimism for much longer, or hope that someone else falls falls under the falls into the ditch first, and you can then dive out of the way and blame it on them. I think it's really easy to be harsh on the project managers. I think organisations get the reporting they deserve, and if you shoot the guy that says we're in trouble, then funny enough, people stop saying they're in trouble. I also think it's quite difficult and quite complicated a lot of the time. So these tools are there to be a bit more objective and actually, yes, help the senior team have confidence to know where to look, but also to a degree to protect the more junior project managers, because it goes, well, look, this is what it's saying and why, and in a sense the data doesn't lie.
Excellent, thank you very much. So Andrew submitted a question and he says, have you measured any productivity and efficiency gains within an organisation by implementing Power BI/data analytics? So
have we? No. Clearly there is a huge amount of adoption of these tools going on out there, and actually not related to this, but for a different utility, we were involved in the how do you make the business case for better analytics and Power BI, and actually if your business case is based around removal of the cottage industry and streamlined reporting, you can just about make it wash its face, but it's not particularly exciting. I think really what for me the question is around, would the business make better decisions if they had better, more timely reporting? And can these tools help with that? Yes. And I think if businesses get that right, the return on investment or the efficiency or whatever you want to do is really massive and substantial. The cost of getting it wrong is enormous. One of the bits that we are kind of next on our list is to look at access control, and basically if I shut a bit of the railway line down so I can do work on it, there's a process to make sure I can give it back on time, or can we risk score that process? I was kicking out the railways when King's Cross didn't open, and that's massive. And so if a tool had helped foresee that or head that off at the pass, I think most people would argue that's a good thing to do.
Excellent, thank you. And I think this question from Ryan kind of follows on. He says, how does a tool like this become the norm? How do you see/have found this being adopted in practice? The construction industry is notoriously slow at uptaking new technology ways of working.
I think you're right. It is a challenge, and the part of that is a well, there's a good answer and a bad answer. The good answer goes back to the kind of the heritage of Oakland, and let's get it into the business processes. Let's actually not just hoist another dashboard or another bit of reporting kit, and actually when that's done, very often they do just fall by the wayside or become cottage industries. We have to design them into the business properly and do that in a proper way. A very quick rant for anyone that's kind of interested, but many of us will remember Microsoft Access, the database or self-built database tool from the early 2000s. It was really, really good, and people built really sophisticated databases in it, and then it was a nightmare because they were built by Fred or Jane who left the business and no one knew how they worked, and many businesses have spent years unwinding that legacy. I think Power BI has the potential of being the same, so it works if it's implemented and implemented properly. I think the other part of it is you do require some tenacity and you require some visionaries in the business, and there will be those who you just can't convince, and you can kind of waste your breath at that. If you can get, I've talked about the different user groups of sort of junior reporters, senior analysts, and ultimately board level people, and if you can build a kind of vertical cheerleading group across all of those, then I think you have a reasonable chance of getting it going. And then clearly the business will judge on whether it works or not. But yeah, I'm not underestimating how hard it is to get things done in construction.
Perfect. Well, thank you for providing a potential solution. And Edwards asked, would this be supplementary to carrying out earned value analysis?
So I think it's different to earned value analysis. So as in earned value analysis would be a really good input. I didn't put it up today because there's wanted to be talking a bit shorter, but there is a really interesting graph for another day, which shows the slippage and milestones in a project, and then sort of lays on top of that the slippage or the change in earned value. And clearly, there's quite an interesting relationship. When you slip something, the earned value should reduce, but potentially the overall cost of the project is going to increase because most slippage is inefficient. And can you build a watcher tool that monitors basically the movement in project milestones and then the subsequent movement in finances, both earned value and spend, and see if the correlation between those things breaks down? I'll say it's a work in progress. I'm a great supporter of earned value providing. I'm a great supporter of earned value full stop, but I don't want, I know not underestimating how hard it is to implement, and why lots of organisations go back to just tracking cost, because it's just so much more accessible.
Excellent, thank you. I hope that helps, Edward. Sarah's posted a good question. How does analytics fit with benefits analysis and realisation?
Well, there's two parts of that. Like, firstly, from a business case in its own right, because you can run the analytics on historical records, it's very easy to go, well, actually, if we'd had this tool, we would have spotted, this spend or this problem a long way, further forward, and would have been able to do something about it. And very quickly, you can go, look, if we can identify a 100 million to 300 million opportunity, then okay, we're not going to get it all, but even if we only got 25p in the pound, that's still worth having, depending on obviously your project. I also think we've had interests around not just forecasting, the classic project schedule, project cost type activity, but what about the other kind of benefits of a project? So, carbon reporting is becoming a bigger thing again. It was a really big thing and then kind of went away, and it's kind of coming back, as are some sustainability aspects or other sustainability aspects. And so, can you, if you have the data at the project level, can you start to forecast both in terms of the actual construction phase, in terms of how much carbon is the actual construction phase going to give? You can start tracking that, but then you also provide a really good set of data for the operational phase and the rest of the life cycle of the asset. So, and there's no reason why this couldn't move into that. Some of the more expansive conversations we've had go, this is great. There's still ultimately a month in arrears. Could we start? It's been in the news recently, hasn't it? It was something about control rooms. So could we start including more real-time information, tracking work hours or vehicle movements, to bring the forecasting, in the short term, the insurance work right forward, so you can start to say whether or not you're going to achieve things in week or in ahead of the month. So ultimately, if you can ingest the data and the data exists, and then the answer is yes. The challenge is the getting it and the engineering part.
Excellent, thank you. I can definitely see we've got two more questions lined up, and I'm aware of the time as well, but please continue submitting questions. I'm sure Richard will happily answer them. So I'm hoping I got Ashok's question right here. Resolving bespoke reporting needs is a time-consuming problem. Looks like such a solution will resolve this. Hence, is it quick to get that data for such needs?
So I haven't talked about it much today because it's the reporting part which is best interesting. But fundamentally, by the time you've collated all the data and have cleaned it and got it into that 4D bubble, then clearly reporting on that at that point becomes a bit of a dream. And there is quite complicated, I think you're right, and you can't just say bespoke reporting is going to go away. But there's a few things you can do. One is you can allow people to build self-service reports on a clean data set, so they're more likely to get numbers that reconcile. You can control very carefully when they blend their own data with that and what they're bringing in, and effectively can put a kite mark on reports to say, this is actually a high integrity output. And then you can also start to build areas where you say, actually, this is a common data area where any region is likely to use the data in the same way. And then here are some more locally produced ones which accept that I don't know, different suppliers or different applications, there'll always be some regional need to tweak things. But the main, it's a contradiction really in wanting to democratize reporting. And I don't necessarily support the term, but anyway, but by trying to push reporting out to the business, which is where it should be done, and I do agree with that. One of the corollary of that is you actually want to centralize the collection of the data and the organization of the data to make sure everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet. And this is one of the bits of the tool set that help with that.
Excellent. Thank you for expanding on that. Definitely, we've got one question here from Catherine who says, my data is poor quality and held across many different databases. How does this work with inconsistent and missing data? So
the answer is you need to go and actually look about how inconsistent. Back to it would be. I wish I could say it's just hoovers it up and doesn't care. That's not true. Ultimately you need the data. We work with a number of organisations and people come and say, we want to do AI, and it's like, well, your data's all held in PDFs all over the place, and it's just not going to work. Saying that, if your data is in proper databases and at that level is organised, then to start the mapping activity to say, well, actually, these bits are the same. One of the advantages of, and this isn't our thing, but the cloud in general, is historically those projects take a very long time just to get the infrastructure going and to get things moving. These days you can spin that up in the cloud and start bringing data together and just seeing the art possible. But back to my building the right team, the thing that you need to do that is people, and it's a rare beast, who genuinely understands the data and the art of the possible from a technology point of view, but who also has a good feeling for the domain, because we've seen it where exactly the same database, as in the application, is being used quite differently by different instances of it and across different bits of the business. And so you do need someone who can interpret what's going on and genuinely understand the business, the real world context of that number, so that they can start smashing things together. Otherwise, you can very quickly smash things together and produce very pretty and very sophisticated nonsense.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So it looks like we've managed to get through all the questions submitted. There's been some nice comments of thanks. Just to let you know, Richard, Ashok has come back to say thank you. That was a great answer. So Deepak has asked, when an organisation initially embraces analytics and brings consultants in, but subsequently loses their way due to organisational change or change in priorities, what would your advice be to continue to rebuild the momentum again?
It's a really tough one, isn't it? Talking about network rail, we started off with one department with infrastructure projects, and they've just been split and distributed out to the new devolved world, out to sort of 5 super regions, simplifying things somewhat. I think whether that's a problem, whether you have consultants or not, I'm not here trying to sell consultancy. If you can get those stakeholder champions, those needs haven't gone away, and it's holding on to those voices as they move around the business. There's also accepting sometimes things go backwards to go forwards. And certainly what I don't advocate is big consulting teams and lots of people, because they just they don't fit very well. You should be able to do this largely with internal resource, accepting there might be a few bits that you can't do. And I'm not here tonight trying to sell consultancy particularly. It's delighted if someone wants it, but that's not what it's about. I think it's saying to people, build the right team, recognise the skill sets you have, recognise actually lots of the skill sets you have need to come from within the business, and then there's a few that perhaps you need to get from outside. And I think I'll leave that on to there.
Excellent, thank you. I hope that helps, Deepak. So Richard, it just leaves me to say thank you for sharing some great knowledge, but also answering these questions along the way, and giving up your time this evening.
So thank you everyone, it's been a pleasure and hopefully useful.
Perfect, thank you. And now I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's attended tonight.